is being without leaving the self, in quotation marks, being without leaving the self, and ahimsa, non-violence, go together. My current understanding is that ahimsa is a byproduct of the practice of not letting go of the self. But I wondered how Michael and Bhagavan saw the connection. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Himsa means harm. What is the first harm and the root of all harms? The first harm is our rising as ego. And that is also the root of all other harms. That is, all harm arises only because we rise as ego. Is there any himsa in sleep? Are we doing any harm to anyone in sleep? Is anyone doing any harm to us in sleep? No, because neither we as a separate person nor any other person as a separate person exists in sleep. In sleep, it's a state of perfect oneness. So it's only when we rise as ego, we see ourselves, the one, as all this multiplicity. And then we have harm and harmlessness, and all these dualities come into existence. So by this practice of self-investigation, we are cutting up the root, namely ego. And when this root is cut thoroughly, then there will be no scope for any himsa at all, because there'll be no two in that state. If there's two, there's possibility of one harming the other. But in a state where there's no two, where there's ekam eva advaitiyam, one only without a second, who is there to harm whom? So if we try to apply ahimsa in the external, in our external behavior, of course, we should try to behave in a way in this world, but we cause minimum harm. But it is not possible to live a life of complete ahimsa, because the very existence of one body depends on consuming other things. Like we consume plants, and I mean, we don't have to do more harm by consuming animals. That's obviously wrong. So we try to minimize the harm we do, but we cannot avoid harm completely so long as we rise as ego and thereby take ourselves to be a body. Even our walking, we're probably walking on ants and small creatures in the soil. If we're walking through vegetation, we're probably harming the vegetation to some extent. I mean, it's not. As an embodied creature, we are part of this whole web of life, and the web of life is constantly feeding on itself, so to speak. So there's no such thing as perfect ahimsa in the state of multiplicity. But so long as we experience ourselves as one small part of this huge ocean of multiplicity that we experience, we should try to minimize the harm we do. But if we want to put a stop to all harm forever, we need to put an end to the root cause of all harm, which is our rising as ego. Because by rising as ego, we are seemingly dividing the one indivisible whole into all this multiplicity. And so long as you have multiplicity, you've got tensions, you've got competition. On a human level, we have within families, you have quarrels within countries, you've got competition between different political factions. Between countries, you have wars. All these things are there. And if we see the natural world around us, the world of animals and plants, there's constant competition. When vegetation is growing, it's in competition with all the other vegetation, which is keep competing for the same space and the same air and the same light. So even among plants, there's competition. There's competition among animals. This is just the nature of this this is the nature of Prakriti. This is the nature of this manifestation of multiplicity. So if we want to put an end to all this, all we need to do is to cease rising as ego, because it is only when we rise as ego that all this multiplicity comes into being. When we don't rise as ego, there is no multiplicity. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ullugnaptu, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. So if you want to give up all himsa, all harm, all violence, all warfare, all disease, all competition, if you want to put an end to all that, all we need to do is to investigate, who am I? By investigating who am I, we bring about the subsidence and dissolution of ego. And when ego subsides and dissolves, everything subsides and dissolves along with it.